So if you're being your own camera operator or DP, a few basic guidelines will help you out. You will be the one composing the shots, and so it is worth learning about cinematography. So here are my tips on being your own cinematographer. Firstly, always fill the frame. This means don't include lots of areas of dead space where nothing is happening. If there is an area of dead space, then position something to fill it or reposition the camera to frame it out. Use the ABC rule. Always be composing. Always be on the hunt for a better composition of your elements. One thing that can help with this is to use the rule of thirds, which is an imaginary grid covering the screen in 9 rectangles. It's good to place your point of interest or action on one of the crosses where the grid lines intersect, and your composition will look better. So when filming people, their eyes normally go on one of the top 2 crosses, giving them enough lead room or looking room on the side that they are facing. This also helps remind you to not leave too much headroom above them, which looks odd. For framing horizontal lines like horizons, they would normally go along one horizontal line, and verticals like a door frame or a tree would normally go along one vertical line. This is of course just a guideline and not a hard and fast rule, but it's good to know the convention before you decide to do something else. For example, you could try ignoring the rule of thirds to make a viewer feel uneasy. You do see films that deliberately do this, but it is usually used for a good creative reason. The director will usually be wanting to make the audience feel like something isn't quite right. You could also try a Dutch tilt, which just means tilting the camera so that it is not level. And again, you often see this to portray the feeling that something isn't quite right. You can also try symmetrical framing, like in the films of Stanley Kubrick or Wes Anderson. And if you arrange your elements nicely, then this can also make some very pleasing compositions. You can also use leading lines to help with composition, where you choose things that naturally draw your eyes towards a part of the frame you want your audience to look at, which is usually your character or your dominant subject. You can also look for any patterns and shapes you can find which appear visually pleasing, and you can use these to make your shots more interesting. Remember to use the different planes in your frame. You have a foreground, a midground, and a background to play with. Adding foreground elements to shoot through, or blurring the background, are 2 good ways to create some depth. I would suggest not shooting characters up against walls if you can. It usually looks boring and gives no separation between your character and your background. If your background is further away, then you will get a nicer blur with your lens, creating more depth to your shots and making them look more cinematic. Keep an eye out for anything distracting in the frame, especially in the background, before you roll. If you are filming somewhere where you don't like the background but you can't control it, you might want to be on a longer lens to blur it out, or you can frame it out. Think about how you want the audience to feel at each moment, and this will help you with what you want to show. This is the concept of film grammar: when to be wide, when to be close, when to be high or low, when to pan or tilt. Everything that you decide can be controlled by how you want your audience to feel. We've already learned about focal lengths and how they can change the feeling of things, but there are also other things to consider. A low shot looking up at someone might make them look powerful, while a high shot looking down might make them look small and insignificant. Think about if you want your camera to be moving, and if so, try and make the movement feel motivated. A pan to one side might reveal a new character or some new information. A tripod shot will feel different to a handheld shot. If your scene is people sat down talking, a static camera might be the best choice. But if it's a gang robbing a bank, then a handheld camera that moves with the action might feel much more motivated. Then we have the 180-degree rule, which helps to keep your viewer feeling orientated in the scene. To follow this, you should draw an imaginary line between your 2 characters and make sure you always stay on one side of it. This way, if a character is filmed looking left, it will appear that they are looking at the other character filmed looking right. But if you step over this line halfway through your scene and film both characters looking camera left or both characters looking camera right, it is known as crossing the line, and they won't look like they are facing each other. An easy way to remember this is to pretend you are watching a play in a theatre. All you have to do is to keep your camera in the audience and don't wander onto the stage. Also, perhaps a more minor point, but you can decide what aspect ratio to shoot your film in. Most cameras shoot in standard 16:9 ratio, which produces sizes like HD, 1920 by 1080, or UHD, 3840 by 2160. Now, there are cameras that shoot actual wider frames than this, but the easier method is to add a letterbox overlay, which is these black bars on the top and bottom of your footage. A lot of filmmakers like to do this to make their films look bigger or more expensive. However, this totally changes how much of the frame you are seeing, and it does actually cut off the top and the bottom of your image. So I wouldn't use this as a default for everything. For example, if you're making something to be mainly seen on mobile devices, remember it will already be being watched on a very small screen, so you might not want to take away even more of the image and make the screen area even smaller. If you know you're going to add some black bars to your shots when you come to edit, it might be worth shooting with this in mind and frame accordingly, otherwise you will not be seeing what you will eventually see when you put the letterbox on top. Some cameras allow you to set some bars over the image so you can see what you will get and what you won't. But another method is just to cover up the top and bottom of your frame with something like cardboard or gaffer tape. So there are some basic tips for being your own cinematographer, so get out there with a camera and start practicing. Happy movie making!